Let's not judge. Let's just be open and curious and really pay attention to what we need ourselves, but also what other people need. Asking, what do you need right now? For me, the answer to that question is like, I have no earthly idea what I need right now. And so can we just be together in the not knowing, right? Can we just be together in whatever it is that we're experiencing? Have you been feeling disconnected, worried, or overwhelmed in life, or when you look at the state of our country and the world? If so, you're not alone. I'm right there with you, and you're in the right place. Hi, friends. Welcome to the Connected Way podcast. I'm your host and minister of connection, Rev Dev. I believe that connection is the healing path forward for us as individuals and as a collective. So on this podcast, we will explore all things connection to self, to others, to the land, and spirituality. But specifically in season 1, we are looking at the coming election through the lens of connection, how we can get informed and involved in politics and this election in digestible and engaging ways, how our spiritual and cultural beliefs and values intersect with and inform politics, how this election fits in with the larger evolution of our society, and how we can actually connect with people in these polarizing times. I know that connection has the capacity to move the needle in this election and in our individual and collective evolution. May it be so. Let's get into it. Well, friends, here we are. Now we know. We never wanted to know this, but now we know. For reference, I'm recording this episode just about 24 hours after I saw the election results. And this episode was unplanned. I thought I might connect with all of you following the election, but I didn't know what that would look like. So I am recording this because it feels right to connect with all of you. And I want to share some support and suggestions and even a few insights that might help you and all of us navigate this time. And honestly, it just feels right to connect with all of you. So here we are. I am sending love to all of your tender hearts, minds, and bodies. In these first 24 hours, I have been at times deep in despair and concern about the state of our country and what might be coming. I have done a lot of crying, and I have done some checking out. And I frankly haven't been functioning super well because I think most of all what I am is completely exhausted. And I know that I'm not alone. I am also very aware that I am coming from a place of privilege and that I am a 42-year-old white cisgender woman with privilege. And I'm very aware that my grief and fears are different than those that are and will be directly and deeply impacted immediately by this election. And we don't know what's coming. We can suspect what's coming, and we don't know for sure. So it's hard. And I know that I'm not alone in feeling the way that I'm feeling or the way that I am experiencing the news. And I also know that there are this incredible range of ways that people will process and are processing this election result. And if you are unhappy with the election result and you may be feeling checked out and as if this is unreal, you may be deep in despair or fear or disbelief or hoping it's not as bad as it could be. And if you're like me, you're vacillating between all of those things and amongst those feelings. So I want to point out that what we are experiencing is grief. And I've learned some things about grief in the last many years. And I know some of you already know this, but it helps me to remember that grief moves through 5 stages. This is based on the research and model developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So I know some of you know this. I'm just going to review this because I think it's helpful to keep in mind and sort of have in our mindset as we navigate this time. So a reminder that these stages can sometimes be linear, but it is often found that more so it's not completely linear and we can sort of bounce around in these stages. So the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So denial is really common at the beginning of a loss. It's a coping mechanism. We can go numb for a while. I have been experiencing that to some degree. And even we can feel like things don't matter anymore. So it can look a lot like depression. And for me, it is a bit disorienting and like you're not totally clear-headed, which is what I've been feeling. So know that if you are feeling this, it is valid and temporary, and like don't add shame on top of that for feeling this way. In fact, don't add shame on top of any of the things that you're feeling, because it is not helpful and it is also not warranted. So typically the second stage of grief is anger. Pretty self-explanatory. But the one thing I want to point out about this is that it doesn't always show up as anger about this exact situation. So you might find yourself or other people disproportionately angry about other things. So you can get like irritable and anxious and bitter and other things. So be kind and gentle with yourself and be kind and gentle with other people, because again, like feeling guilty or shameful or angry at yourself for being angry or having any of these feelings is not helpful. So the next stage of grief is typically bargaining, which is one that people don't necessarily always understand. But the idea is that we sort of like hold on to hope about the situation. Like, okay, maybe it's not that bad, or maybe blank. It's a way for us to feel like we're in control and like, maybe this is okay. And we can also have guilt show up as part of this. And that's a way of us trying to sort of like regain a sense of control. And so that's just something to notice. Like if you have guilt come up, if you have hope come up, if you're like trying to sort of justify that, like, okay, maybe it's not that bad, that's part of the grief process. So just give yourself some space for that. Then there's depression, which again, pretty self-explanatory, but it's when we start facing the reality of the situation. And it can create this sort of situational depression. It is not chronic depression. It is not clinical depression, but it includes like sadness, fatigue, confusion, loss of motivation, loss of appetite. Like you can just be in a really tough place and you might want to check out and feel like you need to check out. And that's part of your nervous system taking care of yourself. So just be okay with that. Like be okay with all of these different stages. And finally, there's acceptance. So this isn't about like being okay with what happened. Like, okay, that was fine. It's about acknowledging the loss and like learning to live with it. So it's about readjusting our lives and ourselves. Like I said, it's incredibly normal and very common to move around in these stages throughout a period of grief and mourning. So you may move through these stages in an hour and you may move through them in days. And so what I hope in sharing this is that you can be kinder to yourself and know that anything that you're experiencing and feeling right now is absolutely understandable and totally okay. We live in a society that doesn't necessarily like love feelings. They can be inconvenient and not help with progress and hard for people to understand, but they are absolutely necessary. And they are an incredibly important part of the human experience. So I think it is not only okay, but really good for you to feel however you're feeling. And I know that can be uncomfortable, but I hope that you can allow for it. And again, it's helpful to remember that we all process this differently. And the most important thing that we can do is allow ourselves to have our experiences and others to have their experiences, and just be kind and gentle with yourself as you navigate this. I've had to learn personally and continue to learn how to be kind and compassionate to myself, because I can often feel bad about my feelings and be really hard on myself. And I've spent a lot of my life shoulding on myself, if you will, right? I should on myself all the time. I should feel this way, or I should do this, or I should be doing this, or I should be feeling this, blah, 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 right? The list goes on. So the one thing that's probably helped me the most in being kind and compassionate to myself about how I'm feeling or how I'm navigating feelings and experiences is to use the simple term, of course. Of course, I'm checking out. Of course, I'm in denial. Of course, I'm tired. Of course, I'm angry. Of course, I'm confused. Of course, I snapped at that person, even though I didn't mean to. Of course, I mean, whatever it is, the list goes on, right? So on and so on. But can you use the term, of course? Of course, I'm scared. Of course, I'm angry. Use that to be kind with yourself. And the other thing that I want to mention, and don't be alarmed if you have a religious past for me using this term, I want to mention the idea of grace, which is related to compassion, but it's a little bit different. So yeah, this is a religious term. And because of that, a lot of people don't connect with the concept and don't even want to go anywhere near it. But in the last couple of years, I've been learning more about grace as a concept because I didn't have really any understanding of it for real. And it's something that I would love for us to connect with more. So the best definition I have heard of grace, which I think a friend shared with me when I was having a conversation with her, is that grace is unearned forgiveness. It's kind of like compassion elevated. So give yourself grace for how you are currently feeling and how you navigate this time. And please give grace to others. This is going to be pretty bumpy and a little bit fumbly and all kinds of things for a little while. So please practice grace and compassion with yourself and others. And perhaps we can just be in this messiness together and just know that it's going to be messy. And please also remember, again, that different people will be moving through these different stages and processing in different ways. And some may be feeling ready to be active and some may feel that not at all. So don't be upset if someone can't show up for you or doesn't look like they're really grieving or anything like that. Let's not judge. Let's just be open and curious and really pay attention to what we need ourselves, but also what other people need. Asking what do you need right now? For me, the answer to that question is I have no earthly idea what I need right now. And so can we just be together in the not knowing, right? Can we just be together in whatever it is that we're experiencing? So since the election results came in, there's been a lot of talk about the difference in how we felt between the election results in 2016 and this one. And I would say that, like many, I wasn't as stunned as I was because it feels like this day 8 years ago was this day of darkness. And the day that the darkness and the fear and the selfishness and toxic individualism in the country really, really showed itself. And a lot of us weren't prepared. I was not prepared. I thought there was no chance. And this time I knew there was a chance. And so we were more aware going into it this time. But on the flip side, we were also more aware of what was at stake and what is possible. And that makes it hard. Really, really hard. And I also know that a lot of you have been working really, really hard. Some of you have even been working really hard for decades. The generations before us, some of them have been working very, very hard. And no matter how long you've been working to secure civil rights, reproductive rights, women's rights in general, LGBTQ plus rights, to bring equality and justice to all, to save the environment, to practice restorative justice, and, so many things with Indigenous people and their rightful stewardship of this land that was stolen from them, and people whose dignity and lives were stolen by slavery and the prison system. And there's so many things that you have been fighting for. And you continued to and have continued to fight to bring equality and justice to everybody that has and continues to be harmed and mistreated and oppressed by this country. And no matter how much or how long or how hard you have been fighting, as a fellow human and an American, thank you. I want you to say thank you. It makes me emotional. Thank you for all that you've done. And I'm guessing right now you might be feeling absolutely exhausted. and maybe even astonished at where we are and perhaps incredibly disheartened that there is so much more work to be done and more fight to be fought. And that's completely warranted. This sucks. It just plain sucks. And it can be really hard to be in this place of grief and also feel like you need to do more work, to be active, to fight. Yesterday, a lot of people were saying to take the day to grieve and tomorrow we get back to work. And maybe that's possible for you, and maybe it's not. I can't quite see straight. I can't even see what needs to be done yet, so I'm not there yet, and I'm letting that be okay. And I have faith that I'll get there, but it's not right now. So it doesn't have to be today or tomorrow. We have to take care of ourselves. Yesterday, my teacher, Diane Burke, who founded the seminary that I attended and who is one of my greatest teachers, and I really hope that she's going to be on the podcast soon. She shared a few poems because poetry is how she shows up. It's one of her practices. And she shared this poem from Steve Garna's Holmes that I want to share with you. Here it is. When news is bad, take seriously your grief. It is love stripped bare. Let it flow through you. Trust that you are held. We all are held by the beloved, the broken-hearted one, the one who suffers most deeply. No, you are not alone. Millions bear your sorrow. Ancestors and even unborn generations walk with you gratefully. Seek others who are tender-hearted. Receive all the grace you can. In the flesh is best, but even in spirit, know we are here. Trust the goodness. God has not given up on us. Through every disaster, grace remains. Refuse to despair. Choose courage over selfishness. Trust over fear. Love over anger. You do not know the end of grace. There is much you cannot change, but bring healing where you can. We are not promised to be given light, but to shine with light. Don't become an enemy of the world and its brokenness. Stay tender. Become a source of comfort and joy for others. Let this purpose bear you through the darkness, and you yourself will become light. Take courage, trust grace. Stay connected. Practice love. So friends, as you navigate this time and as you navigate this grief and the bumpiness of all of this, I ask that you please be kind to yourselves. I also encourage you and perhaps even implore you to navigate the stages of grief. Don't dissociate from them, but also don't get lost in the despair. Don't disconnect altogether. Allow yourself to move in the grief, but keep a grounding and a sort of hold on connection. We need connection now more than ever. And we need to find that in all these levels that I talk about a lot, that they feel really important right now. And I want to share some ways that you can do that, connecting on these levels and what that looks like. So the 4 levels of connection that I see are the connection to self, connection to others, connection to all that is, and connection to spirit. So I'm going to share a few ways for you to do this as you navigate grief so that you can stay grounded, as you navigate the path ahead, both short-term and long-term. So in terms of connecting to self, self is about getting to know your higher self, your connected self, the self that is connected to your inner truth, your intuition, your guidance. And I personally believe that this part of you is also the part that is connected to spiritual energy. So I often call it your connected self or your soul self. It's also the part of you that knows what you need and want and like what is right and true for you in any given moment. And so there are so many ways to connect with this part of yourself, but it can also feel like daunting and unattainable, especially if you haven't necessarily felt this connection before. So here's a couple of things that you can start with. for me, intuitive creativity is really helpful. What I mean by that is like picking up a pen and just drawing whatever is coming up for you, drawing something once a day. It can be writing and writing down how you're feeling, journaling. I do a practice called writing down your soul, and it's really beneficial. And then creativity, you can do collage, you can anything that feels like you're doing something creative that is like attainable and relaxing and connective. So it could be cooking or painting, coloring, whatever. And the big point is that it's not about what you create. It's not about achievement or perfection. It's about simply allowing yourself to be creative and for things to move through you and to come up and show themselves, because you're giving yourself space for that to happen. So be kind to yourself. Don't judge. And just allow anything to come up. It's the practice that matters, not the performance. I think that connecting spiritually helps immensely. And so remembering that we're a part of something bigger than just us is really helpful. So if you have a spiritual practice at all, do that. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. So whether it's meditation or writing or prayer or chanting or forest bathing or whatever, that's great. If you don't have a spiritual practice, perhaps begin by exploring spirituality a bit if it feels at all like it's calling you. So look at some of what might be going on in the bigger picture. And of course, you can keep listening to the podcast and connect with me in the collective and explore that. And there's also on the website, there is a resources page that has a plethora of books and things to check out. Okay. In addition to all of those resources, the easiest access point for me with spirituality has always been nature. And whether it's for spiritual reasons or not, being in nature is good for us. Just being outside and taking in nature. And for me, when I'm able to sort of just be present with it, even if it's literally like my mind is racing, but I'm able to just sit down outside and listen and watch or go for a really slow walk or whatever it is, the earth will show me its magic. Walking outside is how I discovered the concept of magical more. These moments and experiences and things that I saw in nature that were too beautiful and astonishing to just be scientific or a coincidence. And it's also in synchronistic moments in life that, that we feel like, oh, okay, there is something else going on here. Like this thing that I just experienced, this sign that I just saw, or this thing coming together in this like very synchronistic way. It cannot be a coincidence. And so that's where I discovered magical more, was in nature. So go take a walk, go sit outside, go lay on the grass, just be outside. And it's not like, don't go for an exercise walk. It's good for you. It's very good for you and very important for you to take care of your body right now. But I'm talking about just like being outside. So if you're going for a walk, like stroll, but like look around and listen, use your senses. Your senses, connecting with your senses is incredibly helpful. And connecting with your body is incredibly helpful in these times. And one of the things that I often recommend to people when they're just sort of getting started on a spiritual journey is yoga nidra. And there's a fantastic yoga nidra that I love that I will put in the show notes that's on YouTube. So it's free. So you can listen to it anytime. And guided meditations are really helpful as well. I have some of them in the Connected Collective, but there are tons of them all over the place that you can find. So the final level of connection in general is connecting with others. And I know this can be a bit up and down for people right now. Some may want to be more isolated and some may really need connection and community. I literally wore my Free Hugs t-shirt yesterday that I made the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned to go to a rally. And I wore it yesterday because I just want to hug people. I usually I usually want to hug people all the time and I want to be in community all the time. But frankly, in the last day, it's been a day, I've also needed time to just rest. And so I've had tiny pockets of that, and I'm trying to give myself more. So I'm allowing myself to have those moments, but I know that being in community and connecting with others and sharing our feelings, and even if we're not talking at all, just being together and allowing ourselves to be seen and supported is like absolutely essential now. It is essential now more than ever. And like I said, it can literally just be about being present with people. And so if you know, like, I don't want to talk about this, I just want to be with you, please say that. And if you want to talk about it, because people are having different experiences, please get their consent before you talk about it. It's so important for us to take care of ourselves, but also not do that at the expense of other people's needs. And so please just ask, like, hey, can I share what I'm feeling? Or do you want to talk about this? Right? To this point of connecting with other people, I now see that this may have been the reason that I felt so compelled to get the Connected Collective up and running before the election. I haven't shared much about this, but much like the podcast, I have been thinking for years about building an online community for people to feel supported and seen, sort of like a non-church church for all things connection, like a spiritual home for those that feel like they don't have a place that they belong, or they don't have a church, or they don't have a spiritual community, or they don't have a place, because spiritual communities also tend to be like our communities, like where we go when we need things. And I wanted that community to be a place for people to like learn about and practice connection on all the levels and just be in this life together, navigating the ups and downs of life and trying to live a more connected life in a society that seems to want us to be more disconnected, which is not easy. And so being in community doing that is really helpful. So much like the podcast, where for years, I knew it would come together eventually. All of a sudden, again, a month or two later, I was compelled with incredible force to get this community up and running. And now I know why. In fact, it feels like both of these huge like projects, if you will, to create and birth these things, the podcast and the community, for the people and community that I love and the people and community that I want to support. These projects now have greater meaning. My hopes throughout were that the podcast would help with the election, that it would help all of you and anyone interested, that it would create more connection between division. And I also hoped that Kamala Harris would get elected. But that is not our reality now. And I now see that perhaps I was being pulled so strongly to these projects, much more so than anything that I've done in like a really long time, because the podcast and maybe even more so the Connected Collective were needed for this exact moment. The Connected Collective is here for you to be supported in these challenging times. That's what it's here for. I now realize, for you to be able to show up in your authentic experience and feelings, like to feel seen and supported and not alone in this. Forever, I have said that my work and the work as a coach, but now especially the work in ministry, is for you to not be alone, because we're not supposed to be alone, and you are not alone in this at all. And it's a place for us to do these hard things together, to feel supportive. It's built to support you in being grounded in connection through exploring spiritual connection to your connected self, connection to nature, and all that is, and connection to other people, including connecting with an amazing community of other connection-oriented, connection-seeking, and connection-curious people. This is for you. This is here for you. It's here for all of us, and it's here for all of you. And, you know, in the collective, we have a couple of monthly community calls and gatherings, like one of which is sort of like a non-church spiritual service called Sacred Sunday, and the other is a community connection call. And I provide monthly themes for you to explore and reflect on, and give you practices and ideas and prompts and things like that to explore them more if you want to. There's this place for people to share their experiences of magical more. And there is a place, and there are many places actually, for you to connect with other people, for you to share what you're feeling or experiencing, to be seen and supported, to ask questions, to ask for prayers, to just be in it together. And there's a library of resources, worksheets, and guided meditations that help you to connect more. And so it's all the things that I've been talking about. And I really hope you'll join me and the other amazing people gathering in connection if this calls to you at all. There is no pressure, of course, but it's here for you. And I realize now that this is why. And we have our first Sacred Sunday this coming Sunday, November 10th, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And I am going to make that free to anyone. So you don't have to be a member of the collective to come to that. So I want to make it free so that you can feel supported and connected, but also come and check out the collective if it's something that's of interest to you. So this month, the theme in the collective is gratitude. It's November. And that may feel far-fetched right now, but I am sharing some ways to practice gratitude that can help us to ground and reconnect. I think that gratitude is actually an amazing practice that is really helpful, from a vibrational perspective, for us to reconnect and feel good feelings, good vibes. So the theme of the Sacred Sunday in particular on Sunday is reconnecting, grounding, and gratitude. And I would love to see you there. So you can sign up for that at theconnectedway.com/events. And if you're unable to attend live, you can still sign up and get the recording, which I'll send out right after the call. And then also just a note that until November 11th, there is a founding member discount with the collective. So if you sign up by November 11th, you will get the first 2 months for $22.22. And after that, it is $33.33. Just to be clear, it's $22.22, and then it's $33.33 a month. And you can learn more about that at theconnectedway.com. And I will be sharing the links in the show notes of this episode and on the episode webpage, so you can go directly there. So whether you decide to join the call on Sunday, whether you decide to join the collective, both or neither, please know that you are not alone. If you are unhappy with the election results, you're, again, likely pretty unhappy because it seems that people are sort of on one side or the other. But you're not alone in this. We are in this together. And there are millions of people who feel the same the way that you do. I know it may not feel like that right now, especially with how surprisingly quick the results were and decisive. But you're not alone. There are a lot of us. So here is another poem to that point, that Diane Burke also introduced me to this poet, Rosemary Watula Tromer. And I love her. I love this poem. It's a short one. Here it is. When you ask me if I can say yes to the world as it is, today yes is made of lead. You look at me and I nod, and together we carry the weight. I'm going to read it again. When you ask me if I can say yes to the world as it is, today yes is made of lead. You look at me and I nod, and together we carry the weight. Friends, let us carry the weight together. Finally, I want to share some of what I think is going on here and where I'm finding some meaning right now in this. And perhaps that's me bargaining and trying to find hope in this devastating and fearful moment and decision. But I'm going to share it anyways, because this is what I've been feeling for quite some time. And I wonder if it will give you some sense of meaning and solace in this time. So I think that for the last 8 years, the shadows and darkness of our country have really been showing themselves. And it's not just our country, it's all over the place. It's all over the world. So unfortunately, those shadows are really strong right now. And we are seeing that in many spiritual circles and ideas and concepts and philosophies. There is this discussion, and has been for years, about darkness showing itself, that it can be brought into the light and healed. So throughout the podcast, I've spoken with people who have spiritual concepts to share about what's going on. So I recapped those in episode 23. If you want to go back and listen to that, there's more about the concepts that we covered in the episode thus far, or in the podcast thus far. But the general idea is that there are many spiritual and cultural philosophies and ideas that point to this time being tumultuous and challenging as we go through a massive transformation as a society and a species, shifting from individualism to collectivism and from control to collaboration, from conquest to collaboration, and from toxic masculinity and patriarchy to more of a balance of the divine feminine and masculine energies. We are in the midst of like a massive transformation, and transformation is not easy. We are unbecoming in order to become, and it is really ugly. And we are experiencing that ugliness. And unfortunately, it seems that it's going to need to get worse before it really shifts to getting better. And I know it sucks, friends. I know it really sucks that it needs to get worse, that apparently we aren't at the bottom yet. So there are two specific ideas that I want to call out to this point. They're from previous episodes, and these are moments when I can really see that we need to navigate more before the shift can really happen. So when I was speaking to evolutionary astrologist Michelle Dench for episode 21 about the astrology of the election, she shared that the astrological time we are in right now, we have not been in since the Declaration of Independence was signed, which is wild. So that was a time of strong rebellion all over the world, actually. There was a ton of change and a lot of shifting and lots of revolution. And so what's happening technically in terms of astrology is that we're moving from Pluto being in Capricorn, which it's been in for the last 16 years. And Capricorn is associated with authority and structures and government and banks and big businesses and father figures, aka patriarchy. And these years that we have been in this cycle have been lifting the veil on the truths of these systems. It shows the shadow. And on November 19th, Pluto moves into Aquarius, which is about innovation, rebellion, community, and humanity coming together. Yes, please. But it's apparently not going to be an automatic shift that happens with an election. So Michelle specifically said, quote, 4 years from now, something will shift by the time we get to the next election cycle, where more of the predominant control actually returns to the people, and or we see more of the shadow effect because Pluto can reveal the shadow being in the power dynamics that we have been accustomed to, which are no longer serving people in their evolutionary growth. End quote. It's happening, friends, but it's not happening as quickly as we had hoped. Which is the same thing with the second concept that I want to talk to you about. And that was something that Ganga Devi shared with me in episode 22. She shared with me that the concept of the fourth turning, or the Strauss-Howe generational theory, is playing out. So that as a species and a society, we have historically moved through a cycle that has 4 turns to it. So the full cycle takes like 80 to 120 years, but typically around 100. And there are 4 turns in it. The 4 turns each last about 20 to 30 years, and they are a high, an awakening, an unraveling, and a crisis. And they continue in that order. It continues to cycle in that order. And it's generally believed that we are in the 4th turning, the crisis. And it is generally believed that that crisis began on September 11th. So that was in 2001. So we're 23 years in to a typical 20 to 30 year cycle. I had hopes, and Ganga Devi Brahman had hopes, that we were being pushed into a high, with Kamala Harris's election, but that is not necessarily the case. So I want to read you something that I found in my research after Ganga had told me about it before we recorded the episode. And it helps me right now. So in this PDF that I found describing the concept of the fourth turning, I found these descriptions of the two turns that we're talking about. The crisis, which is what we're in. Quote, the crisis is an era of destruction exemplified through war, where institutional life is destroyed. However, as this period ends, institutions will be rebuilt. Sound familiar? And society will discover the benefits of being part of a collective, and community purpose will take precedence again. That is also part of the crisis. That's what happens at the end of the crisis. So I think that's where we're at, friends. The PDF then goes on to say, quote, and then the high which follows the crisis that ended the previous cycle is typified by strong institutions and social collectivism and weak individualism, end quote. So I think we're at the end of the fourth turn. I think we're in the end of the crisis. It may last for 4 years, but my hope and my thinking is that the next 4 years, although they might be fraught with challenge and conflict, it is moving to massive change, like massive change. Perhaps our broken systems are all coming to life and showing themselves so that they can be dismantled and new ones can be built. I have no idea what that looks like or how we will navigate it, but I want to share that that's where I'm seeing some semblance of meaning in this moment and also some hope. To that point, here is another poem actually that multiple people shared yesterday that I absolutely love by a poet named Shaylin Harkin. It's when the earth shakes and foundations crumble that our light is called to rise up. It's when everything falls away and shakes us to the core and awakens all of our hidden ghosts that we dig deeper to find once inaccessible strength. It's in times when division is fierce that we must reach for each other and hold each other much, much tighter. Do not fall away now. This is the time to rise. Your light is being summoned. Your integrity is being tested, that it may stand more tall. When everything collapses, we must find within us that which is indomitable. Rise and find the strength in your heart. Rise and find the strength in each other. Burn through your devastation. Make it your fuel. Bring forth your light. Now is not the time to be afraid of the dark. Friends, let us not be afraid of the dark. And if and when you are afraid of the dark, let us lean on each other like nightlights in a dark room. My favorite part of Vice President Kamala Harris's concession speech yesterday was at the end. She shared, quote, I'll close with this. There's an old adage. A historian once called it a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here is the thing, America. If it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion stars. End quote. You, my friend, are a star. You may not feel like you're burning super bright right now, but your light is there and it will shine more at different times because that light is innate to you. As Vice President Kamala Harris said again in her concession speech, but earlier, quote, sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. End quote. I agree with her. We can't give up. We must do the work, and we know that it will take a while. But that also means that we need to take care of ourselves, to be resourced and connected. This is going to be a marathon. I know you feel like you've been running an ultra marathon for a really long time, but we have to keep going. And we all need support. We have to take breaks. Maybe you don't do that in a marathon if you're well trained, but we need to take breaks. And with a marathon, we need water and sustenance and good shoes and people who can train us and cheer for us and have signs for us. And I hope that you will find those resources for yourself. And especially right now when you might not be running at all. And that's okay. It's fine to take a break. And please know that the Connected Collective is here for you if you want to join. It's a place for you to connect and feel resourced for yourself and know that you can show up and have this place of solace and connection so that you can build up your resources for yourself so that you are in a good place, but also so that you can show up and be of service to the world if you need it and however you choose to do that. So kind of like a marathon, the Connected Collective is like a gym membership for your soul. It's a place to show up and be cared for and to get stronger by being more connected, stronger in your soul and stronger for other people. I want to close out this episode with arguably the most hopeful thing that I have seen in the last 24 hours. It is a quote from Gandhi that speaks to everything I have shared today about finding meaning in this challenging moment. He said, quote, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it, always." End quote. Friends, please tend to your tender hearts, your tender minds, and your tender bodies. Please find connection wherever it is, whether it's here on the podcast, in the Connected Collective, or anywhere else. Don't lose yourself in the grief, but rather allow for the grief. Allow yourself to be in denial, to be angry, to be checked out, to be bargaining, to be depressed, and finally to find acceptance. And eventually, we will accept it and keep fighting. I am always here for you, always. I am here for you now more than ever. And as with all of the helpers in the world, I am navigating the bumpy road of tending to myself and supporting others at the same time. The Connected Collective is helping me personally to feel more connected and supported. But I'm also intentionally working to take care of myself so I can support all of you and support our mission moving forward to create a more connected society, to move the country and the species and the world into being and living more connected. So to that point, I want to share a quick note about the podcast. As I said at the beginning, this episode was unplanned. I did not know what would want to come through, if anything, following the election, because I didn't know what was going to happen or how I would feel or what would be going on. But here we are. And I had a rough plan for what the podcast might shift to that was based in the hope that the election would go a different way. Largely, that's because I didn't want to give any energy to the possibility that this might happen. I knew it might, but I didn't really want to go there. So I am regrouping and determining what is next for the podcast and for my path in this world and in this work. I will definitely be in the collective, and you will likely hear from me in the next couple of weeks on the podcast. So please stay tuned. You can follow me on any of the social media channels and sign up for the newsletter on theconnectedway.com at the bottom of the page, any page, to stay connected and up to date on what's going on. And of course, you can connect live anytime in the Connected Collective. So I am here, friends, and I am thinking of you and sending you love as we navigate this moment and the moments ahead. May you be kind and gentle with yourself and others in feeling and experiencing exactly what we're feeling and experiencing. May we be curious and not judgmental with ourselves and others. And may we find connection in these moments and move towards a more connected way of being as individuals and a collective. Thanks, friends. See you next time. Thanks for joining me for this episode of The Connected Way. You can find all the resources mentioned in the show and even more resources in the show notes and on the podcast page at theconnectedway.com/podcast. Before you go, a note about sponsorship. This podcast is currently sponsored by me, Rev Dev, and you, the listeners. If you're interested in supporting the podcast and the work of the Connected Way, enhancing individual and collective connection to self, others, the land, and spirituality, you can donate on the podcast webpage. There is never any pressure or expectation, but if you feel called to support the work, any contribution of any amount helps, as do your good thoughts. And finally, I'd love to hear your biggest takeaway from today's show. What inspired you? What surprised you or made you think? Let me know by posting a comment on any of the posts or DMing me on Instagram, or of course, you can always send me a message on the website. Thanks again for being here, friends. May this podcast bring more connection to you and the collective. And so it is. See you next time.